Oh my gosh, it feels like my first day. But that's because I've been enjoying beautiful Banfield, and I've got into that routine of not getting up too early. But at any rate, welcome everyone. Thank you for your attendance today. Good morning. I'll call this meeting to order, and I have 10:01 this morning. Just for those who may be online, you can watch this meeting live on the ACRD website. And I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is hybrid. So it's both virtual and in person, and it's being held throughout the Nutchalla territories. And we're grateful to be able to share this beautiful and bountiful land. And I'm going to start with introductions, and I'll start with myself, and then I will go to my left. So we'll go clockwise. My name is Bob Beckett. I'm the Area A Director for Banfield, and I have the pleasure of chairing the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. And to my left.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Hurg. I'm the General Manager of Planning and Development at the Regional District.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Hackett. I'm the Executive Director of the Tofino Long Beach Chamber of Commerce. I know it looks like I'm online as well, but that's an AI that's doing notes for me. So I'm here in person.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jolene Dick, the CEO of Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Jolene.
Good morning, I'm Mike Sparrow, Cherry Creek representative.
Good morning, Ken McRae. I'm Freeman of the City of Port Alberni. I'm also Director of the Island Corridor Foundation, a member of large of this committee.
Thank you, Ken.
Good morning. I'm Cindy Solda, City of Port Alberni Rep, City Council.
Good morning. I'm John McNabb. I'm nobody. Actually, I'm a delegate for the city. So like the representative population. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Kristen Cardonahue, Administrative Assistant for the Regional District.
Kristen, thank you. And at the back, we have Mike. And just say good morning, Mike, and then I'll go back to those who are joining us virtually.
Yeah, good morning. Mike Pearson, I'm the Director of Transportation for Vancouver Island District.
Thanks, Mike, and we'll be hearing from Mike very shortly. So let's go virtually right now. And even with my glasses, I can't see the board very well. So let's see. It looks like Colin. Do you mind starting off, Colin?
No problem. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. My name is Colin Cosman. I'm a land use forester with Mosaic Forest Management.
Thank you, Colin. Marilyn.
Good morning, everyone. Marilyn McEwen, Mayor of Ucluelet.
Thank you, Marilyn. Marcy.
Good morning, everyone. Marcy DeWitt, Coordinator for the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network.
Thank you. And Dan. You're on mute, Dan. We see you. That's great. Thank you. Good morning. And is it Dean? Sorry, I am.
Yeah, Dean Fauchon, Manager Contract Services with Sawakin Forestry.
Excellent. Thank you. And it looks like Olson.
Yeah, well, clearly I'm not Marissa Olson, but I'm Arn Elias, and I'm with the board of the Port Authority.
Thank you very much for that. And Samantha Hack, that's you, and who's covering for you?
That's the it's an Otter AI assistant.
Oh,
it does notes for me, so I don't have to take notes in person.
Oh my gosh, that's the first for me. That's great. Thank you. Neither have I. And yes, sir, Zoran.
Thank you, Zoran Knezer from Port Alberni Port Authority.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Item number 2 is approval of the agenda. And I don't know if anyone has anything else to add to the agenda. I do. That being the case, I would like under item 6, which is correspondence, to provide you a verbal update from Daniel regarding the $70,000 and the for the work that we as a committee have recommended and approved. So I will speak to that. So I need a motion. Go ahead, John.
Motion to approve the agenda with the additions.
Thank you, sir, and seconded by Cindy. All in favor? Approved. Thank you very much. Item number 3, declarations. Are there any declarations of conflict? Seeing none, thank you. We'll move on to minutes. Item number 4, minutes from the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting held February the 9th, 2024. Is there someone that would move the motion to accept or adopt those minutes? So moved. Thank you very much, Ken, and seconded by Mike. All in favor? Approved. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure now to, under section number 5, under presentations, to thank Mike and his team for coming out this morning and for all of the good work. I had the opportunity to take a quick look at your slides in preparation for today's meeting, and I'm very impressed and very appreciative of the work that you and your team have done. So without further ado, Mike, if you would come to the front, please.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to provide an update on the emergency access route study that we've been talking about. Today with me, I'll just do some quick introductions to people in the room. I have Nikki Schneider, who's our operations manager, and Ann Coffin, who is our with our planning group, our senior planner. And then we have 2 representatives from Parsons Consulting, who are the consultants leading this study for us. So today I'll be co-presenting with Ken Curry, who is from Parsons, and so he'll be speaking more to the work that they've been up to. But just leading into that, I just wanted to maybe do a quick, let's see if I can do it this way, so you can hear me. I'll just do a kind of quick overview just to remind ourselves how we got here and where we're going. This won't take very long. So again, this is on the heels of the fire that we had last summer, which impacted the highway for a total number of 87 days, closed it for 3 weeks. And then we had, as you can all remember, and I don't like to remember, we had impacts all summer long. And so following that, we wanted to look at all the emergency access routes available to us, compare them from a technical perspective, and then provide that into a report for further discussions about where that goes in the future, not only from emergency preparedness, but also in terms, I know there's a lot of interest in secondary routes. So in January of this year, we retained Parsons Engineering to get this started. And there's really 2 phases of work. The background data, which is where we're at right now, which Parsons will speak to in a little bit. And then phase 2, which is what we'll be embarking on sort of starting in the next few months here, is really starting to get into those valuations. And then we are expected to complete this study by the end of the year, early 2025. And then I expect to be able to come back to you guys with a more detailed report, share that and present that, and then for further discussion. So phase 1 of the scope was reviewing all the past studies. As probably many of you in the room know, this has been studied. This or variations of this have been studied many times in the past. There's more reports than you can count on the Horn Lake Connector. The latest one being the 2016 business case. There's reports going back to the 90s about the Valley connectors that would connect a whole inland route from Lake Cowichan all the way up to Cumberland. And so there's lots of background material to pull from. It's nothing new. Really, this time the difference is we're looking at it from an emergency access route perspective. Last year, we had to pull the trigger on using the Lake Cowichan route quite quickly. I was quite confident in that decision, but we want to make sure that there may be other options or better options out there. And then we've also acquired LiDAR. If you don't know what LiDAR is, it's basically aerial survey of all these potential routes. So we now have survey for each route, as well as high resolution ortho photos that go with those. And then we're also kind of looking back at the effectiveness of the route that we used last year. And so that's where we're at. And I kind of just spoke to this a little bit. But yeah, there's many studies that have been done. The map might be a little bit hard to read there, but all those sort of green, long green lines or blobs that you see there, that's all the LiDAR survey that we have collected. So thankfully we already had, there's been a lot of work done on the Banfield Road. So there's detailed information about that route. We collected the missing pieces, excuse me, to Lake Cowichan, as well as up to Cumberland. And then Horn Lake already has that data, so we didn't have to collect it again. So with that, I might pass it over to Ken, if you want to come up in here and join me. Thanks, Mike.
So right now we're in the process of collecting, some more data in the field. So we have the mapping that Mike mentioned about the LiDAR. So that kind of gives us a lot of elevation information along those potential routes, and then we're collecting other data, to get an understanding of what's along all the different possible emergency routes that could get us to Port Alberni.
Excuse me, Ken and Mike, would it be okay, or would you prefer us to hold our questions till after the presentation, or what's your preference?
I'm good to have them.
Yeah, I'd say jump in.
Yeah.
The presentation is quite short, so just jump in with questions. Yep.
Perfect. Then I'll jump in with, without getting too technical, what's the data you're looking for so that we can perhaps better understand how decisions are made as to what's a better route. So again, better routes for dummies, and for me, please.
No, so that's a really good question, and I'm glad you actually asked that one, because when we get into looking at these routes, so we're going to be looking at we've got a certain classification or the design standard that we'd like to achieve for emergency road. So we want to have 2 travel lanes, or at least the width for vehicles to pass. And then we look at grades on those, and then we look at the geometry as well. So are we trying to avoid things like switchbacks and really sharp curves, because we have to look at the type of vehicles that are going to be using this. So we looked at last year, we have commercial vehicles that are using this route, and the steep grades are going to be really difficult for larger trucks, and the sharp geometry, if we have the switchbacks, going to be really difficult for larger trucks to negotiate those curves. So we want to understand what that horizontal geometry is out there, and that vertical geometry as well. Other things that come into play here is we'll have a slide coming up with some of the routes that we're considering, is just the lengths of the routes themselves and the conditions of the routes. So we have this kind of general design standard that we want to have out there, understanding that this is an emergency route, right? This is not going to be a permanent route that we're looking for. This is for emergency travel. But we want to make sure that the length of the route, how much is on pavement, how much is on gravel, how much is on seal coat type facility. So that will all come into play, of the quality of that route as well. Is if the more pavement we have, then it's a better route for the general public to use, as opposed to a gravel route. The other thing is this, back to the length of the route. We want to look at, and we'll do a bit of a high level evaluation of where people are coming from and going to, make some assumptions about that, so we can see what the vehicle kilometers traveled overall. So for, say, looking at trips from Nanaimo to Port Alberni, if people have to divert all the way down to the old route before, it's 149 kilometers to do that route. But if we have another route that is only like 70 kilometers, that might be a better route from a travel distance standpoint. But what's the quality of that route? So we have to weigh all these things off as we evaluate each one. And so it might be a shorter route, but it might have really steep grades that almost give it a fatal flaw. So we want to look at the vehicles, you know, the amount of traffic that's using those routes, and try to keep that overall total vehicles kilometers to a minimum as if we can, but knowing that, you know, we're trading off improvements that might be necessary to get us up to a certain standard, or, you know, things that we just can't overcome because the terrain is just too difficult in some of those routes that we're considering.
Thank you, Ken.
Sure, I'll talk about this one. Just briefly, I'll touch on it. I don't want to have to relive what we did last summer, but just a reminder of the route we used last year. And speaking sort of to what we're considering in terms of the data, when we used the emergency route last year, we had about 1,000 vehicles a day. We were conducting daily counts. So when we're thinking about the route, whatever emergency route that may be, we have to think about not only everything that Ken just said in terms of topography and alignment and width, but also, like, ideally for this emergency route, if it's going to be the official emergency detour route, we would want to be able to accommodate as much of the normal Highway 4 traffic as possible. Normally on Highway 4, there's 12 to 16,000 cars a day. We were only getting about 1,000 cars a day on the detour route when we were using it last summer. So there's a significant amount of people who just weren't traveling. And so we want to be thinking about that too. Like, how could this be used at any time of the year? Thinking about elevation. And can it accommodate the level of the amount of traffic that we need it to? So again, I kind of sort of spoke to this a little bit at the beginning. So it was about 87 days that is impacted. So the other challenges we run into this, and not to get into details, but this route is administratively complex. It's a private industrial road. It also uses public roads, and it also uses private roads. So that's something else we wanted to be looking at as part of this whole study, is who owns the roads and who administers those roads, and how can we work with those who own those roads to make this something we can use in an emergency.
Before you sit down, Ken, I'm gonna, again, I don't mean to jump in, and I keep looking to see if there are any questions. I know that Cindy had approached me as others have with respect to, everybody was concerned about this year. And so just before we leave, you know, that discussion and that map that's up there, if we were to have a significant event, and thank goodness we had a couple of days of rain, because that's going to help us. But in the event that we had to shut down again, would the Bamfield Lake Cowichan be the go-to road in the interim? How well is it being maintained so that there's confidence to know that, heaven forbid, we have a hazardous incident response issue or another wildland interface fire situation? Is that the road to go to? And how quickly before it could be, you know, maintained to an appropriate standard?
Mm-hmm. So it is the go-to route. We've used it last year. We know it's tested and it works. Through the work of the Hoyt, a big portion of the Bamfield Road is, as part of this detour, is now seal coated. So it's actually in better condition than it was last summer. We know that the section between Franklin Camp and sort of the Lake Cowichan side, that's the part that we'd have to maintain. We'd have to bring it up pretty quickly. We could do that within 24 hours or 2 days at the most. We could be doing that while operating the route. So I'm not too worried about the maintenance, the surface maintenance of that. I mean, it is what it is in terms of gravel road, but I think the complexity comes in with every emergency is when do we pull the trigger on? We're not, if it's just a crash or a bigger incident, there's a decision process we go through there before we say, now this is going to be long enough that we're going to open up the detour. That's not going to be an immediate. I know there's often that pressure, like, the highway's closed, open up the detour. Well, the detour is at least 4 hours, as we all know. And so, and for us to even set it up properly takes even more time. So we would be managing expectations about when the highway gets closed. It would not be immediate. We would be working with the ACRD and all the other emergency responders to be like, what does the situation look like? before we pull the trigger on that. But in the meantime, we can be doing all the prep work. So it is the go-to emergency route, and it will be the one we use. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Cindy.
So let me understand this. This is, so we can't get through Highway 4, so we open up the Banfield that to get out of our community. But there's a hold, there's a pause, could be a day pause, or can we use it? I'm hearing there's a pause.
There's a pause, it's the communication pause. So the highway is closed, people do what they do. There would not be any messaging from the province, or I imagine from any other local government at that point, until you understand the situation before you start saying, yes, we've properly signed it, we've got flaggers all out there, go use this detour route. People have the ability to use it any time of the day now. But we wouldn't be advertised, we wouldn't be recognized, we wouldn't put that on Drive BC or sending out any other public messaging to that effect until we understand the gravity of the situation.
So the practical thing is to maybe an alternate route out of this community, basically, that we don't have to have any pauses. We could just, you could take A or you could take B. And that's probably much more practical. And I look at it, if we're going to put all this kind of money towards, if we have to put money towards an emergency access where we're pausing, why can't we look at a permanent deal here?
Well, that speaks to a lot of the issues we're going to have to work through. An emergency detour, you don't need to invest a lot in that. I mean, it is primarily an industrial road, and it will remain that. So it's still owned by those who own it, and you don't need to do upgrades. In the event of emergency, we have a plan, and we know what to do, and we know where those issue points are, so we can manage those. If you want a secondary route, you want it to be a public highway, then we need to raise it to a much higher standard. There's a lot more rigorous design applied to that, and as well as costs, and we'd have to deal with the administration as well.
And I understand that because the last time you were here, if we want the second route, come up with a business case, basically put the money to the business case and then go from there. That's what you had alluded to last time?
Correct. Yeah, business casing would have to be done.
Thank you. I don't want to get too far in the weeds.
That's okay.
No, and that's fine, Cindy. I absolutely, I encourage these type of questions. I think it is beneficial that we as a committee and a community recognize that if something was to happen whereby we had to access an emergency access route, we all understand that it would be the Banfield Lake Cowichan route, so that we're in a better position to be able to advise our communities and get that information out, and that knowing that the ministry has chosen that route and has processes in place to bring it up to standards, so that if it was to happen, that would be great. Now, I'm going to continue on. We have John, Ken, and Arnie. So I'll start with John, go to Ken, and then go to Arnie. Thank you.
I'm just really hoping that the ministry understands that the Lake Cowichan route was a failure. It was a failure from my position in the community, in a business basis. It was a failure for anybody that had family that was going back and forth. It was a failure for anybody that was an employee that was going back and forth. Turning a 1 hour turnaround to Nanaimo into 4 hours was impossible. And medically, I don't know if the ministry understands the stress that is put on businesses in the community, families in the community. It's not recoverable. I mean, my small business lost about $1 million in income, cash flow, that was not recoverable, period, just not recoverable. And that's just a small business. I mean, there's big businesses, there's people that lost their jobs because of it. We got to find something better than that. And I'm hoping that the ministry understands that, because it just, I mean, I'm not a person with a lot of emotion, but my stomach is turning right now because that's not what the community wants. I mean, it might be what somebody else wants, not what the community wants.
No, I completely it is not lost on me at all, the impact and significance of the closure last year, and I have the greatest sympathy for everyone who was impacted. I have received all of these comments and feedback, and I take it very seriously. And I appreciate that an emergency route is a bit of a Band-Aid, but it is a first step. And this work is really technical in nature. It sets us up for further discussions about and business casing and everything else that we might be able to do to look at a permanent secondary route. I just don't think the conversation's there yet. But I completely appreciate the stress that last summer put on everyone.
Thanks, John. Your comments earlier about the number of vehicles from 16,000 a day to 1,000, speaks volumes. And I continue to look forward to seeing the economic and social, issues that will help with that business case. Because I think, if John's talking $1 million for his business, we're talking multi millions of dollars, never mind the social aspect and the health stuff. But let's go to Ken, please.
Oh, I was on the committee 40 years ago. And McMillan Bodell was the main person, because they were interested in getting their products out of the valley because it would stop. So McMillan Bodell and us, and we had Cowichan. And it's just about 10 years after we had the tidal wave. So we were quite concerned. I was president of labor at that time. And we had a big committee together, and it fell apart. And then I became mayor. We had the Link Road Committee, so we're all involved in that. And out of that, we got the highway from Port Rentry, went to Cowichan, paved and fixed up, and that's about all we got. And we tried to get the one into Courtney, and they fell apart. And then we tried to get the one into Horn Lake. We did a lot of work on that, And one of the people that you should be talking about is the First Nations in Quality. My wife is First Nation, so I even brought her to the meeting to see if it would help a little bit. But you should definitely talk to the First Nations in Quality before you go too far in this. And you should talk to industry. I sit on the log export board for Canada and BC. So I talk to Catalyst and I talk to the Sand Group, all the rest of the people in the valley every month. And if it happens again, they're going to shut down because their product is so valuable. They can't take it on that collection road. They tried it and it damaged everything. High products we make into it. And a lot of men involved in that, a lot of families involved. I think we have to really look at families because, if you have a shutdown, it's a family that's involved. And it's a lot of people. And after waiting 40 years, I think we deserve something a lot better than just, well, maybe this is going to happen. You have to talk to the man, talk to your highway minister. I remember him when he was president of labor. We used to work together. So he's come a long way in life, that guy. But anyway, let's hope we can get something here after 40 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. We'll go to Arnie, and then I'm hoping we can get back to the presentation and get back on track then, please. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, this is pertinent to, as I'm new to this committee, my question really is about scope. What is the scope of this committee? How does this connect to strategic planning for highways into the future, say, referencing an inland highway, for example? So I'd like to be clear on what the scope of this committee is and what we're talking about. And I think that sort of is what a lot of other people seem to be indicating.
Thank you for that. And I'll get Mike to jump in if I miss anything, but we initially, had discussions about emergency access routes versus secondary routes. Cindy just talked about, if we had a well-established and appropriate secondary route, then we wouldn't necessarily need to look at emergency access routes. But we in consultation with the Ministry of Highways and with the rail potential possibilities for whatever that might look like, a decision was made that we would prioritize the work to look at emergency access routes. And that's what we're currently doing with thanks to the Ministry of Transportation for undertaking this study and evaluation on their dime. The ACRD has agreed to spend up to $70,000 on a study and a business case on how do we move this forward. We've heard today, again, some very passionate speakers, about the frustration, the concerns, and justifiably so. So I think that the mandate is to advocate for action. And we've agreed that we would start out with addressing emergency access routes, followed by the next step, which would be discussions on secondary routes. So I think that's our mandate. And Mike, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I don't have anything to add, but we certainly can get you the copy of the terms of reference and email it to you, Arn.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
And that everything is on the website. So thank you for that. Mike, if you would carry on, please.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm gonna pass it back to Ken, actually.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. So just to get actually into the scope of our study. So now we're talking about phase 2 that we're into now. So we've done a kind of a summary of the background documents and information, what happened last year. So now we're starting to investigate what are some of the possible routes that are out there. And so we are looking at, we have Route 1 that was used last year through Carleton Lake. I'm not going to get into a lot of details here on the routes, but we have Route 2 showing, and I'm going to, but Route 2 is coming up from the Courtney area, and it comes down, and there's like 2 alternates there. We have Route 2 and 2A, and they're coming down to Port Alberni from the Courtney from the north. Back to Route 1, we looked at a shorter route using a different logging route there, Museum, Maine, and that one shortens the access, the length of the Route 1 a little bit, so it's a possibility. I mentioned Route 2, Route 3 and 3A are coming from Nanaimo along the Nanaimo River Road. And then there's one that's dropping down Route 3 back to Route 1. So it's shortening up the overall route a little bit. And then there's 3A that connects up back up to that Museum, Maine Forest Service Road. Those ones, the Route 3 and 3A, are difficult. They have upwards of 18% grades in there. So once we start getting over 10% grades, very difficult for commercial trucks. 18% is, getting into that fatal flaw area. And they also have both 3 and 3A have some tight geometry, so there's some switchbacks involved in those locations. And same with Museum, Maine route. It has some switchbacks located in there, so some steep grades and some switchbacks. So the horizontal geometry is quite tight in that area. And then the last route option that we're got on the board right now is the Horn Lake route, Route 4, and a little bit shorter. It's about the shortest of all the routes, but it also has some steep grades. It has 18% grades in there as well, so that makes it really difficult to overcome when we think of commercial vehicles. So these are the ones that we're looking at, and we kind of showed a little bit some color codes there, about what portion of the roads are gravel, what portions are paved, what portions are seal coat. And as Mike mentioned, another consideration that we need to have in here is like the jurisdiction. So all these routes are all made up of a combination of different ownership or jurisdictions. We have private industrial roads, we have some public roads. So it's a administrative complexity there about how we manage these roads. And and maintain, if we do define one as the emergency route, as an alternate. So our work in this thing is that, we're investigating these things, so we're looking at what are the existing profiles of those routes out there now, where do we have issues where we're not meeting that kind of general guidelines in terms of geometrics. So where we're not meeting grades, or we're not meeting in width, or we're not meeting in horizontal geometry. So where do we have those deficiencies? That's what we're into the investigation right now. And that will be the big picture, is as we get down there and start evaluating how much of a route can we fix up, at what cost, to bring it up to a certain standard, knowing that this is an emergency route. So we don't want to be, there's some sort of, there are limitations on costs. So we're looking like, what can we do to address those deficiencies, and if it's exorbitant cost, then it would again fall off the consideration.
Ken, just for the optics, I'm wondering the way it's labeled, Route 1, Route 1A, Route 2A, et cetera. These aren't numbers that are associated with any kind of priority. So that'd be number one. Number two is, and following up a little bit on what Cindy had talked about, would you be considering, if you're looking at fixing up an emergency route, would it make sense to recognize that maybe that would eventually be the secondary route, so that there may be some additional costs associated with beefing up the emergency access route, recognizing that perhaps down the road the ministry in the province would be turning that into an alternate route. Just your thoughts or comments, and maybe that's a Mike.
That's a Mike question.
Yeah, no, it speaks to what I was trying to explain earlier. Ken's work will put basically all the cards on the table for each of these routes. So we'll have a full understanding of each route, the challenges, the investment needed on them, and their suitability. And then if their business case, the West Coast region may decide they want one route over another, you can use this base information to make your case. So we may come to a different conclusion for emergency route, but all the information is there for any of these routes to be explored further. And if there's priority for one or the other, then you have that base information to use.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, just a comment. So when they put the inland highway in, you guys must have this, all that work that went into that. I said to our MLA at the time, Gerard Jansen, where is the cutoff going to be to Port Alberni? He says, get on my motorbike. And so away we go up on the gravel road over the new bridges to where is now Horn Lake cutoff. And there's a forestry road that went down there to a gate. And then the gate would go into Lost Lake and over the hydro lines into Cherry Creek. And I know what happened to that, because when it got to the time when they're getting near the finish line, they said, you know what, we don't have enough money to put that road into Port Alberni there. We'll find another route. So we got that half-ass route that cuts into the main line. So have you guys ever looked at that?
So
I have all the information on it.
I'm very familiar with
plan.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with all the plans from the Inland Highland Highway projects. I haven't
real short route. Yeah.
I haven't seen the route you're speaking of. I've seen variations of that. But no, I haven't seen that particular one, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I could take another look.
Too bad Jansen wasn't still with it. He still talks about it.
Right.
Thank you, Ken. I'll get you to turn your mic off and I'll go to Zoran, please.
No, thanks, Mr. Chair. Looking at, and we have, as we expressed here, a rather emotional group here in regards to what's happening here. And talking about 12 to 16,000 vehicles a day at Highway 4. And let's assume a worst case scenario, we have, God forbid, an earthquake and brings that Angel Rock on top of the road and you ride down for a year. Do you think any of these routes can maintain that traffic either of them for the volume that community needs. And wouldn't be prudent while we are doing this to have and one route may be better than the other for you, but may not be better for us. Why don't we have two emergency routes prepared? So we have, for example, just saying this Hornway connector for the cars. So we have emergency access for people to commute back and forth, just for the cars, and maybe have a longer one for the trucks to move out of here. And I think, or other routes, but we need to have this community open, and the ministry, in my opinion, should be looking at this. Whether alternate route is a long ways away, and the community has been pushing it for centuries, as Ken alluded. However, something that we need immediately, I think we should have two, and look at that seriously, in the sense that we need something fast, quick, for people can get their medication, and also keep the community flowing.
So I think you raise a really good point, and something we kind of realized last year too, is there's a lot more work that can be done on emergency planning and preparedness in the event of a catastrophic event. Yeah, we're all worried about Highway 4, not only between Parksville and Port Alberni, but also from Port Alberni to the west coast. That section's always having issues. We're actually going to be fixing a few this fall. And so I've raised it at the staff level with the other CAOs about getting into more of that emergency planning and preparedness in the event of a catastrophic incident. I would say that in that case, we would be looking at any option available. So if the only route that was available and in good shape was the Cumberland route, then we would be using that. So this doesn't restrict us to any particular route. Again, in a catastrophic event, anything that's available or open, be it the rail grade, a route, or even some other means of travel, we would be exploring any of those. So, but it does highlight we need to do some more work on this so that we're prepared for that. Oh, perfect time. We're at the next steps. So I told you this presentation was short. So Ken, I don't know if you want to speak more on what you want to next. Sure.
So as we're into phase 2, so we have kind of identified a bunch of different routes, and I think your question there was very appropriate about can we look at a couple of routes for different purposes. So that'll be something that we'll consider in there. So we're trying to do a kind of a high level evaluation of these considerations and these routes that we have on the map right now. We are exploring a few other alternatives in there. We want to kind of screen out the ones that have some fatal flaws, and then we want to go out into the field and actually verify some of the conditions out there on those routes. So we'll probably be out probably end of this month out on a lot of those routes with our geotechnical engineers and our environmental specialists to go and check out what's out there, what are our constraints, what are our challenges, and what might need to be done to overcome some of those, knowing the constraints in terms of if we had to move into across a water stream, or we had to have some unsafe or unstable geotechnical conditions. How do we solve those? So we'll get some real life information on those shortlisted routes, and then we'll kind of put some costs to those things, and then we'll be putting together a technical memo or a report at the end documenting our findings from that review and our evaluation, and we'll have that to the ministry probably at the end of the year for review, and then we'll then be back with Mike back to the report out in early 2025 what our findings are on a particular route, or maybe even routes that for different purposes.
Ken, Mike, with respect to that report, can you briefly articulate what that report would give us, like, just so that I have a better understanding of it's not just technical. I mean, and again, I'm thinking out loud that, we're going to be looking for clear recommendations that that will speak to all of our conversations today so that we can go to the next phase, which is advocating, pushing, et cetera, et cetera. So again, what will that report say?
Yeah, so the report in essence will provide, we'll have a summary, basically a technical summary of each corridor. That would give you all the information you need about the road itself. It will also have a multiple, what we call a qualitative multiple account evaluation. So basically we compare each route against the other ones for cost, length, level of improvements needed, et cetera, all those sort of things. So you can look at every option against the other ones to compare them. So you'll basically have a report that shows you, here's each route, all the sort of information about it. Here's all the routes compared against each other. And here's the ones that for emergency access route we would prefer. And then that would be it in summary. That sets us up, as I said, as we've discussed. Now you compare every option against each other so that you can take next steps in terms of where we want to go with business case.
And at what point would and perhaps you have the expertise, but at what point would the stakeholders be involved in some of the decision making? So especially commercial traffic, so that yes, route 2A is the preferred route because the gasoline tankers can safely travel that. I'm just using that as an example.
No, it's a great question, and it's something we haven't put our minds to just yet. But maybe it is the next thing we do in early 2025 is we bring the technical information in, then we go out and speak. I heard the comments about industry are very important to me because that was one of the biggest challenges, even with the detour use last year. Administratively, it was painful for insurance reasons and all kinds of other reasons. And so maybe that's what we do next is we go and speak with the industry and the public about their thoughts.
Thank you. I have John, Cindy, Mike.
Well, I mean, that leaves us with the route we have today well into tomorrow. So I'd like to just hear about what happened to our plan with regards to McMillan Park, Cathedral Grove. Obviously, the community input fell off the wagon somewhere because what's happening there is an absolute recipe for disaster. Everything that's being done, I travel that route about 3 times a week, and everything that's been done has exasperated the problem. Putting in the no post past the Cameron bridges, put the traffic parking a kilometer and a half down the road where there really is no parking. I went by there yesterday and there was traffic on the other side, and as I was passing this truck that had parked on the side of the road right on the line, right as I passed him, he opened his door. There's kids walking on the road, there's pets walking on the road. This is what we tried to get away from with our community input, and we put us right back into it. Between that and the pinch point at Angel Rock, both of those things, when you get into slippery weather or snow or somebody that's tired, any of the triaxle trucks are crossing the line there. And I know we had to fix it, but I don't know what happened to our community input because I'm sure our community input didn't envision what's there today.
So I'll speak to that in 2 parts. So you'll remember last fall, we were talking a lot about how we were going to get through the winter and what we we're doing at where the fire site was. And so Nikki has been working with our maintenance contractor as well as an arborist, and we've been doing in conjunction with BC Parks. We're doing danger tree assessments at least once a year, usually twice a year. And so if and when we need to take down trees, we're trying to be proactive so we don't get unplanned closures. Likely before the fall here, we're gonna go in and probably do some preemptive cleaning up behind the barriers just to make sure we have lots of capacity back there. We haven't seen a lot of rock fall. We haven't seen any issues. The work that we did, we had to get through last summer has really paid off and worked. We haven't had any issues. The curve that we had to tighten up right at the weather station there, that was for the rock catchment, and we had to use the lane for that. We have reduced the speed to 30 kilometers an hour on that curve. Technically, it's possible. We have to work on the enforcement of that. People are going through a little bit too fast. That's always an issue everywhere. But we can continue to work on that. There's more we can do in terms of signing and things like that. There is a project to be done there, I guess. It's a matter of where that falls in priority, because the project would realign the highway a little bit, maybe get rid of that 30K curve, but you're still going to have a 2-lane highway with shoulders, and that's what you have. And so there's that piece. So we're managing the site still quite intensely with monitoring and proactive measures. In Cathedral Grove itself, we're still very aware of the issues that are going on there. I've been through there twice in the last week and seen the same issues that we've always seen. The ministry has done a lot of work, as you know, proposing solutions to that. It's just been kind of put on the side for now for a variety of reasons. But we're still looking at what else we can do to manage and improve the safety there. It is a very tricky one. There's a lot of it is outside of our abilities to do things. But we're still very vested in finding something we can do there. So I know it's not a great answer to that question, but it's a tricky problem that goes beyond staff. It goes into a political realm of things. So
I'll jump in. I have no chair at the moment, but when they put the no post in by the bridges, it actually made the problem worse. And if you saw that the traffic is now where it's actually really close to the road versus off the road where the bridges have a little more side to them. And what's happening is they're, for some reason, they're not parking in the parking lot. And, you know, like I went by and there was like 10 spaces in the parking lot and cars, you know, a kilometer down the road. But I'm thinking that the no post side barriers need to come out. And in order to alleviate that, I'm not quite sure why they went in. But if somebody is, if I thought of risk, I would say the risk of somebody getting hurt there is really high.
no, and I don't disagree. And it's very difficult to manage. Like with the no post barriers, I was even thinking as I've driven through the last couple of times, if you're coming towards Port Alberni, just past the parking lots, anyone parking on that shoulder, it's got a steep drop off. I had the same experience with someone opening their door right in front into the travel lane. I'd almost think more restrictions on parking. I know we're chasing a problem. That's the issue. So we put them there, they're going to go somewhere else. But trying to deal with the immediate safety issue of stopping that stuff from happening, I'm afraid of someone falling into that ditch, either with their car or themselves. So as I say, it's not an easy one to solve, and we're kind of chasing the problem. But those are some of the thoughts we have.
Thank you for that, Mike, and thank you for that, John. Again, I want to be cognizant that we try to stay somewhat focused on the project and the work at hand. I think that with those valid comments, I'm going to turn to Mike and ask Mike as a staff member to perhaps move that forward for an agenda item on the ACRD board level conversation, so that we can go back and revisit some of those concerns. I'm going to move on to Cindy, please.
So I won't go on about Cathedral Grove too, so I'll just leave it like that. But anyways, what I want to mention is when we talk about commercial vehicles and maybe having commercial on one and cars on another route, the thing is not all commercial vehicles are the same. We have commercial vehicles that couldn't take that route because if they were carrying boats, I mean, shrink wrap only goes around certain vehicles and nobody's going to take it over on a gravel road. I know some of the companies here, my son-in-law works, Port Boathouse there, and they had to rent, we've had this conversation prior, rent in Parksville to drop everything off. They just wouldn't bring it over. And I'm not sure about new vehicles and stuff like that. The same thing, the road is just not practical. So you need to keep that in mind. There's a light industry as well as heavy industry, and logging trucks, no problem, bang, right? They have no issues. I know, also regarding, I know there was people that did not move to this community and will not move to this community because just in case again, right? So that's the biggest thing. And I know out of town businesses suffered, and I'm sure the Chamber of Commerce can give more clarification on that. So yeah, I'm really concerned about that emergency route, and it would be interesting to see what the bigger picture looks like, and when you start doing the comparisons and stuff like that. So, but I do like the idea that the chair had mentioned, like, if we pick an emergency route, could we switch it into a permanent route, and it would help save some of the costs because we've already done some work on a route. So I really do appreciate that comment. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. I'm going to go to Mike, and then Dan has been patiently waiting. I'll go to Dan after Mike.
Well, thank you for that. So according to your numbers, we only have 1,000 cars use the bypass route as opposed to 16,000. So that's 6 to 8% of the vehicles traveled. So over 90% did not travel that route. So a lot of that was industrial traffic, right? There was no lumber leaving, no paper leaving, no new cars, no new boats. People missed medical appointments. It wasn't great for 87 days, according to you. So that's not all great. So if you're going to do this emergency route, and it's not chip seal part way, what are we going to do to get 12,000 vehicles on there if we have to do that? Because the bridges are very skinny, they're one lane. I came to a skidding halt this weekend because the guy coming the other way was not going to stop for me. And I don't know how fast he was going, but he was leaving the road. So how are we going to manage that route to get 12,000 cars across it, which is going to be a 93% increase over what you're saying? How's that going to work?
Yeah, so I should clarify one thing. You're right. By my numbers, we have about 12 to 16,000 cars a day on Highway 4. We had about 1,000 cars going through the detour on a daily basis. The only time that the Highway 4 was completely closed was for the 18 days. Outside of that, we still had 1,000 cars on the detour, and we were getting about 1,000 cars an hour on Highway 4, even with that single lane alternating, lots of delays, but it was something. So in the event of emergencies, reliance on one route it can only be short term. The sooner we can get Highway 4 back open or have two routes open, there's no way you can accommodate the normal traffic in an emergency situation. You're accommodating a fraction of it. You're just trying to get the highway back open as quickly as possible. So the intent of the emergency route is to accommodate as much traffic as possible and make it as safe as possible. But I would not expect it to be able to accommodate 100% of the Highway 4 traffic in an emergency situation. I wouldn't expect 100% of traffic in an emergency situation.
So this report of yours, are they going to give the cost or any ideas of what it's going to cost me to make the bridges 2-lane bridges to help alleviate? Because there's quite a few bridges out there. Is that further down the study line?
I would expect this study will be able to provide a very high level cost, even a cost range. It's not going to get to the granularity of replacing each bridge or anything like that. It will identify the number of bridges that need to upgrade, that sort of thing. But so it'll give you a pretty high level estimate of what the costs would be. But as I say, it would be quite high level planning numbers.
I got them now. A few things real quick. So we're not to Pacino this weekend. Beautiful up there, by the way. The worst bridge I went across was the China Creek Bridge, which it needs resurfacing and it's terrible. Is that part of the maintenance program you have right now, or is that on the logging companies? Who's going to do that maintenance this year?
So that speaks a bit to the administration stuff. That is part of a privately owned portion of the road. That's owned by Mosaic. And so the ministry has no role in doing that maintenance.
One little quick one. So I went to Banfield and I don't really know my way as well as you do, but that's okay. So some of the signage on the side of the road is getting overgrown by, vegetation, because that's what happens out there. And whose responsibility is that? Clean up, so we can see all the signs going out there.
Yep, same issue. It is a private industrial road. And so between Mosaic and Sawakin, they manage to operate the road, maintain it. And so the province, we have through agreement, we provide some funding, but it's quite limited, and we have no jurisdiction over it, so we don't actually do any maintenance on that road, except in the situation of emergency, where we'll take over the road.
Lost one, Mike.
This is the last question. So right now, it's a chip sealed road. Are you sort of washed your hands and now it's Tawaska and those people taking care of it now, or are you still fully involved in helping with the maintenance?
So we haven't washed our hands of it. We never had it. It's a private industrial road. The province has provided the funding to do that project. But again, the maintenance remains with those companies. But we're continuing our maintenance funding agreements with both companies.
Thanks, Mike, for that. And Dan, thank you for your patience. Go ahead, please.
No problem. First of all, sorry, I'm in my car. I'm on my way to Wyoming. Great presentation, Mike. Really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the technical memorandum. I did have a question, but I'm going to hold off on the questions for later. I just want to say that I look forward to the phase 2, the technical memorandum, and I do think it's going to be quite important to reach out to all those critical players, the hospital, the pharmacies, all the different businesses that require specific transportation needs for that we found out last time. Anyway, that's all I got to say. Great presentation, much appreciated. Looking forward to moving forward.
Thanks, Dan. And that is the key, that we continue to move forward. Kristen, you have a question or a comment on chat.
Yes, this came from the Zoom question and answer section from Chris Alamani. He asks, may I please ask the presenter to expand on his comments on the railway? I realize the terms of reference for the committee are focused on a highway-based route, but from a ministry perspective, is there consideration and conversation happening with the Island Corridor Foundation on activating the railway either to help in an emergency for both industrial or commuter traffic and long-term as a way to build resilience and capacity into the overall transportation system? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So the ministry back in March of 2023 provided $18 million in grant funding to the regional districts as well as the 14 First Nations along that are impacted by the corridor. And there's been ongoing discussions with that group. The intent of the grant funding was to come up with a common vision and use for the corridor, be that train, be that active transportation or road or whatever. The intent is to come to consensus on a common vision for the use of the transportation corridor, because we all recognize how important it is to the island. Those conversations are ongoing. The ministry has been part of them and facilitating them, but they are being led by the regional districts and the First Nations. I don't know if I know you have more to add to that.
Go ahead, Ken.
Long-term member of that committee. We now have a new CEO. I would suggest that we invite him to come to our next meeting to the Island Corridor Foundation.
Thanks, Ken, for that. I think at this point, I'd like to thank both you gentlemen for your presentation today. And I'm going to jump ahead. We're going to have a discussion in a moment under item number 6 regarding potential next meeting in early October. And perhaps Mike can, I know that's not too far away, but even if there was a 2-minute update as to the work done. I think it's important to continue to provide confidence, to this committee that things are moving ahead. And as Dan said, we're getting close to seeing the fruition of phase 2. So thank you for your presentation this morning, gentlemen. Yeah, so Cindy has asked if we could get a copy of that. You have no problem, I assume, sharing that. We have it here in ACRD, and I'm happy to, through staff, to get it out to the committee members.
Yeah, I have no problem with that at all. And just one thing I'd say, and probably everyone's aware of this, with the provincial election in October, we may not be able to meet that month, but if it's in November, we probably have no problem coming back to speak again.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much. Moving on to item number. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the update and specifically for the rationale on the pause. I know when an emergency happens, people expect that immediate answer of where are we going, what's happening, what do I do, what's going on. So I think from the Chamber of Commerce and Port Alberni Visitor Information Center perspective, like now we can confidently let people know that that's expected. This is the in-between time where decision making happens to weigh the benefits and understand what the plan is for the short term, medium and long term, and that when information is available, it will be provided, although not in the methodology that the public certainly expects, which is on demand and instantly. And that reaffirming that people will use the detour whether or not it's ready or not, because they have that knowledge of when it was closed for those times. I think moving forward, if we do have an emergency, we're talking about all of the routes that are available and bridges and people. When you mentioned the bridge incident that you had, Mike, this weekend, is how can we do a little more public education on road safety? At the visitor center, we're constantly telling people, yes, the road to Bamfield is chip sealed, but it's still an active forestry road. It is still 60 kilometers per hour per speed limit. The logging trucks have the right of way, don't cause the disruption. So if there's any resources that the information center can use to circulate on public education, on traveling on roads in emergencies and or back roads in general, that would certainly be appreciated to help us inform the public. And then we look forward to the public and industry engagement in 2025 as part of the phase 2.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. So moving into item number 6. As I mentioned, in preparation for today's meeting, Daniel and I had some discussions, and he shared this with me. Just wanted to follow up with an update on the other key areas that may come up on Tuesday. In March 2024, the board approved a $70,000 budget for the Transportation Committee. Staff will be issuing an RFP to find the resources required within our allotted budget to help the committee with its work. Prior to issuing the RFP, we did want to get an initial report back from Modi regarding their work on alternate emergency routes. We also wanted to ensure that we are sufficiently advanced on the work that we are doing with the Rail Corridor Working Group. The Rail Corridor Working Group will be commencing public outreach in September, and there is a media release link on the ACRD website. The work being advanced by Modi and the Rail Corridor Working Group have impacts of the work the Transportation Committee is doing. Having a clear understanding of the active work these other groups are doing will provide the Transportation Committee with the opportunity to focus on building the business case they need and not duplicating the work that has been already done. A question for the Transportation Committee is whether they would like to see and discuss the draft RFPO prior to having it issued. If this is the case, we will need to prioritize a committee meeting for potentially October of this year. and staff have indicated that October 2nd would coincide with a meeting of the rail committee. So it could be timely. I also think that, again, taking the pulse of the group, you know, we perhaps might want to continue to meet as early as October 2nd to keep the flames underneath the you know, the work that we're doing. John.
I would move that we meet October 2nd to keep the flames underneath the people.
And that was seconded by Cindy. So the motion would be that we would meet on October the 2nd. And could I see a show of hands for those in favor, please? And so moved. Go ahead, Arnie. Do you have a comment? Sorry, thank you.
No, I didn't actually. I just wanted to raise, again, it comes back to the scoping issue that I raised earlier, which is to what degree are we looking at a secondary route? Is it a bare bones emergency route, or are we looking at a more strategic connected plan to highways policy that looks further down the road at something that can handle the throughput that we need in an emergency situation? And I think these are points other people have raised. So I still think, I know the TOR terms of reference are going to be limiting us to what we can do, but I do think we need to coordinate our thoughts strategically with the larger picture, and I think that will be my main comment.
Thank you, Arnie. And I think that's what Daniel was trying to relay to me as well, is that we can't work in silos or isolations, and to not include the work of the rail committee would be a mistake, because whether the rail goes through or whether that land becomes a potential corridor, these are all things that strategically we would want to have conversations about, and I'm sure that the ministry, you know, is aware of that as well. Item number 7, there's no request for decisions. Item 8, no reports. Number 9, is there any late business? Seeing none, Kristen, is there any questions from?
No, there's no other questions or comments from the public within the Zoom or at the responses at ACRD website or email address.
Very good. So I will again thank the ministry, Mike and Ken, for your presentation today. Appreciate everyone, both here in attendance and online, for participating today, recognizing that many of you may be on holidays or looking to get out and enjoy the summer weather. So thank you for that. Our next meeting is October the 2nd. I'll confirm a time, but I assume it'll be 10 a.m. And a motion to adjourn, please. John, seconded by Mike, all in favor. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Safe travels to wherever that may be.